screen starts glowing, and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. This is Brian. Dan, you there?
Hey, Brian, I'm here. How are you?
Pretty good. It's springtime. May. You got May thoughts? May doings?
I don't really have strong May opinions, I gotta say. I don't know. What about you, Brian? Do you have strong May opinions? Feelings?
Not really. It's one of the times of year where there's not a whole lot of seasonal things going on unless you're a pagan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're really into that midsummer scene, then you may have May feelings. Or at my campus, you know, we just wrapped the semester, and it's a very liberal school, and there were definitely some posters for May 1st, which was, I guess, it's like a communist holiday. It's International Workers of the World Day or something, going back apparently for a while. That May Day is like a labor holiday.
So what's the origin of saying May Day when you're in a plane that's about to crash?
That's a great question. We should look that up, and maybe by next week we'll have an answer, but I don't have anything to tell you right now.
In Scooby-Doo, there's a joke where something like that's happening, and I think it's Fred or maybe it's Daphne hears it and says, May Day, but it's September, or something like that. It's like...
Cue the laugh track.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think there's an Ernest movie where he goes, May Day, Christmas Day, Columbus Day, and he's just yelling holidays as he's spiraling. But, as we always do, we watched a movie this week, and that's the meat of the issue. That's what we're here for. This time around, for episode 168, the film we watched comes from 2017, and it's called Dave Made a Maze. So what did you know about this one coming in, Dan?
Nothing. I don't even think I'd heard of this one before.
Yeah, I don't remember where I saw the trailer, but at some point along the way I saw the trailer, and it piqued my curiosity. It's the only cardboard labyrinth movie that I've seen. Best ever cardboard labyrinth film, possibly.
If I were to make a tier ranking, this would be one of one at the top.
Fantasy draft of craft maze movies. So apparently this movie was produced on a budget of $500,000. The director was Bill Watterson, but not the Bill Watterson who made Calvin and Hobbes. Although I think there is like some shared creative tissue with Calvin and Hobbes. It kind of has a similar spirit to an extent.
Yeah, that I noticed that was the first thing I noticed when I pulled the movie up. Is it said directed by Bill Watterson? And I like fell out of the chair I was sitting in. I was like, "He made a movie?" And then I clicked on it, and I think it's even spelled the same way.
Yeah, same spelling. Yeah, on Instagram for this director, like his handle is Bill Watterson, or at Bill Watterson, and then like the bio statement is not that Bill Watterson. And I probably should have researched a little more what else he's done, if anything. But he made this film, and it won the Slam Dance Festival the year that it came out. And Slam Dance is focused on independent films with budgets under $1 million.
I saw that this was like a big hitter at Slam Dance, and I was like, I don't even think I've heard of Slam Dance. Have you seen much else from this festival, Brian?
I've heard of it. Obviously, the name draws on Sundance.
Yeah.
But I think it was established, I mean, to recognize, like, small budget films, obviously, but I also think that like Sundance, when it originated, may have had an indie focus. And then, like, more people started making indie films and throwing more money at indie films and having, like, A-list actors starring in indie films. And it kind of changed what an indie film was. And so, thus, the origins of Slamdance to kind of return to that original spirit.
Mm-hmm. The real dance is here.
We're not sunning anymore, we're slamming.
There are a bunch of film festivals out there. I've learned a lot about them since I've been getting more into movies since we started the pod and working on my review website. There's like some obnoxious ones too. There's like a one where the goal is to get drunk and watch the movies. I was like, that just doesn't sound like something you'd want to do. I don't remember what that one's called off the top of my head, but I read this thing about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Every town may have a film festival. Maybe not everybody does, but a lot do. And it's just different niches, different venues. And so, like, the ones that matter, quote unquote, they have often restrictions. They're like, your film has to premiere here. You can't be showing all over the place. You can't be at some nothing festival. To give us prestige, you need to, like, manufacture exclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can't be up on YouTube. It needs to be special to us. And that's how we make ourselves important.
Right. Interesting. Speaking of festivals, right now, the Cannes Festival, is that how you say it?
Yes. Yes. It's not cans with an S.
Yeah. I never know if it's Cannes or Cannes. I say it one way and then I get corrected.
Cannes!
Exactly. But the new Francis Ford Coppola movie that has been gestating for like 25 years, maybe longer. I think it'd be like he outlined it like when he was in film school or like shortly after he graduated film school. And it's just been like kicking around for a while. And kicking around is kind of an understatement. He basically was like, all right, I'm just going to make this damn movie. And he spent basically all of his money, like $120 million of his own money to make this movie. And it's gotten really, really mixed reactions. It's got like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes or 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's Megalopolis. And it's apparently like just utterly bananas. Stars Adam Driver, and it's got Shia LaBeouf in it, and just this weird cast and weird premise.
And the guy who looks like Matt Damon, who's married to Kristen Dunst.
Oh, is he in that one too?
I think Jesse Plemons, right? Is he in it?
Maybe. I can't remember. But I'll definitely watch that one when it comes out in a place that I can see it.
Okay. Jesse Plemons is not in it. So whatever the weird trailer I saw that had Jesse Plemons is just a different weird movie.
Wait, were you thinking of the Yorgos Lanthimos movie?
Possibly. He had a big face.
Oh, yeah. That's Yorgos the Yorgos movie.
Okay.
It's going to come out. It's like called Kinds of Kindness or something like that. But that is premiering at Cannes as well.
Okay. I think they should have a film festival made all out of movies that couldn't get into Cannes, and they can call it Can't. And in that vein, this movie, Dave Made a Maze, caught my attention because it has these epic things happening at like a low budget scale. Like big ideas realized on a small budget. Because the premise is that while this guy, Dave, who's like a 30-year-old, while his girlfriend is away, he builds a maze in his apartment. And this is essentially just a cardboard fort. So a lot like there's an episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob can see the wonder in a cardboard box and Squidward can't. And Squidward gets like gradually obsessed with how can SpongeBob get all this enjoyment out of a box. Also, I mentioned Calvin and Hobbes, and there are multiple Calvin and Hobbes storylines that involve what can you do with a cardboard box. You can build a time machine or a transmogrifier. That's what he does several times, is he builds a transmogrifier, and he can like make clones of himself or like Jekyll and Hyde himself.
Right. Similar spirit to Calvin Ball, too, where you're making up the rules as you go, inventing and expanding upon what you have built thus far.
Right. So the girlfriend comes back after, like, the opening credits roll, and she finds this maze that fills up, like, the central living room area of the apartment. So not a huge apartment, and this is filling up the main room of the apartment. And Dave calls, like, yells out from inside the maze, saying he's lost. Help me, I'm lost. But it's a small room, and it's like 5 boxes scotch taped together.
Right, this is pretty funny to me because he's calling out like he's in some deep cavern, but we're seeing it from the perspective of, like you said, we're just in a set that's like a condo or an apartment, and it's just this little room with a few boxes standing out there. So it's like, what is going on here?
And she's not having it at first. She just goes to lift up the box, but like as she grabs it, you hear this rumbling, and also there's like a humidifier in the box, so there's steam coming out of vents on the sides, and Dave starts to scream and groan, "No, don't destroy it! There's more than meets the eye. It's bigger on the inside." And so what he advises is, he says, call Gordon, who is Dave's best friend, and Annie calls in Gordon, who arrives to, like, consult on the matter. And yeah, the production design at this point, we're just in a little room, like very pedestrian, normal, cheap apartment. At least cheap in terms of a film set. And Dave also yells out that Gordon and Annie, the girlfriend, should not enter the maze. They shouldn't try to follow him inside to find him. So, like, briefly, they try, like, knocking on the walls and saying, "Do you hear this? Come to this noise." But pretty quickly they determine, like, I want to go in there. Let's just go in and get him out if we can't lift the boxes up. But first, Gordon calls a few more of their friends, as well as some randos.
Yeah, I don't know how all these people just started showing up. I would be mad if I was someone living in this apartment. It's like tourists are coming here and like documentary filmmakers and stuff.
Yeah, but that's like the comedy that they are going for, is occasionally some unexpected random things will happen. And yeah, among the unexpected guests are Flemish tourists, they say, from, I guess, the Netherlands, as well as a hobo who they brought in because he knows about cardboard. But one of the friends who arrives, my favorite friend who arrives, is a filmmaker named Harry. And this is a guy that they know. And he's brought, like, a cameraman and a boom operator. So this is their indie film friend. And he's played by a guy named James Urbaniak. I'm not 100% on that surname pronunciation. But this is the only actor in the movie that I recognized. And he plays the dad on the cartoon Venture Brothers. Have you watched any of that show, Dan?
I've never seen any Venture Brothers.
Okay. When I saw, like, scattered episodes back in the day, it didn't grab me. But then, freshman year of college, my roommate sat me down and was like, we're going to watch this show from the beginning, in order. And it's very good. It's like a parody of comic books and old cartoons, and it's just very reference dense, but it tells a good story.
Okay.
And so there's this central pair of kids who are kind of like the Hardy Boys, like they're mystery solving teens, and their dad is played by James Urbaniak. And his story is that he was also like a boy adventurer back in the day, but has grown disillusioned with super science, like the field of like pulp fiction, like pulp adventure, like kind of the thing that they were going for in that recent the Disney movie, the weird controversial one, Strange World. Like drawing on that era, the pulp fantasy, pulp sci-fi of the earlier 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the tradition that this character, this dad, was like drawn through unwillingly as a boy. Like his dad was an adventurer, and so he got dragged through that, and now he's kind of going through the motions of dragging his sons through this pulp adventure world, and just has gotten very like blasé and like unmoved by the whole thing, disillusioned. And he's just always like bitter and pithy, and he's one of my favorite TV dads. So to see him here in a movie, I enjoyed.
Oh, nice. I do like good TV and movie dads. It's become ever since I became a dad, I get excited about interesting and good dads. Have you seen Bob's Burgers?
Yes, I've watched like the first 10 seasons of Bob's Burgers. I gotta watch some more.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, they're like on to 15 or something now.
Really? Wow.
I think so.
I guess kind of makes sense.
The years keep coming and they don't stop coming, Dan.
Right, yeah. My wife and I, one of the only times we ever did a couple costume, was she dressed up as Louise and I dressed up as Tina from that. So that was fun. But anyways, good. That's a good TV dad there in the animated TV show realm.
14 seasons, 272 episodes and counting.
Okay.
But yes, a good TV dad. My favorite TV dad is still Hugh Neutron. So maybe somewhere along the way we'll get to watch Jimmy Neutron. But so I had positive brain chemicals seeing James Urbaniak in this movie. And he plays this director who I think is like a little bit of like indie film navel gazing, indie film inside baseball. He's always giving commentary, like directing the people around him, and it always made me laugh.
Mm-hmm. It's like a running gag that he wants people to restate what they just said, even if it was like a dramatic moment. Like, say it again, but say it in like a complete sentence so that I can film it and for the documentary and edit it in and stuff. And I thought that runner was kind of funny. I mean, he doesn't explain that every time, but he like says, say that again in your own words frequently.
Right, in your own words. This whole group has assembled, and they decide, we're going in there. We're going into the maze to get Dave out. And so they go in under the like loose leaf paper sign marked enter, and now they're inside. And what do we see?
Yeah, so a couple things on this. So one is the movie itself is like 80 minutes long. It's not a long movie. And we don't see the inside of the maze for 13 minutes, which is long. And I wrote that number down because I noticed it. How long it felt long, I guess. And so I wanted your thought on this, Brian, because at first, I was like, oh, we're going to get in the maze shortly. And then we're at 5 minutes and 10 minutes and we still haven't gone in the maze. And I was like, is this going to be a thing where it's like entirely outside of the maze and like we just have to imagine what's on the inside? Because that's going to make Brian really mad if that's the case.
Well, I already knew from the trailer it wasn't going to be that.
Okay, that's true. Because you've seen the trailer, right?
Yeah, it did surprise me how long we spent outside the maze, though.
Yeah.
I thought it could have been truncated, but I don't know. Maybe, like, part of the joke was that it takes us a while to get in the maze, but I didn't quite get it if that was the case.
Yeah. But once we get in there, it's like we're not just in little cardboard boxes. Like, we're in whole huge room-sized sets. But it's like once you're on the inside, it's just sprawlingly massive. It's like I don't even know if we ever get a sense of how big it is, but for what is contained inside these cardboard boxes inside a little apartment, we see maybe 50 different rooms in this maze throughout the film, and each one is like a big full-on room. So yeah.
Right. Cavernous. And so what it made me think of at different points, like this 100% I feel must have been influenced by the movie Labyrinth from Jim Henson. Like there's a scene with a mouth and like big eyes where this like big cardboard face is clamping its mouth up and down and they have to crawl through the mouth. And that seemed like the most obvious nod to Labyrinth.
Yeah, it's interesting because like when we first get into the maze, like the first couple rooms that we see just feel like big spaces with like cardboard walls. And it's not clear that there's more to this maze that he's made than just spaces that are made out of cardboard, but it pretty quickly becomes much more.
Right. Yeah, so they're traveling through it, and remember that Dave is lost, so he's like not there at the entrance to meet them. He's in there somewhere and they have to find him. But the friends are traveling through, and like one of the friends originally he didn't come into the maze because I think it was that he didn't know what to say on camera. So then he left and he had like esprit d'escalier, spirit of the staircase. Like he came up with what he wanted to say and he's like, hey, wait a minute, guys. And comes into the maze. And so like for most of the movie, he's going to be like trailing behind the rest of the group. But yeah, as they travel, things are getting more complex, more confusing, and seemingly more impossible. Like, one of the things that Harry, the James Urbaniak character, says is, so when did Dave develop the ability to create life? Because, like, there are these origami cranes in there that seem to be alive, and then other things, like maybe the whole maze, also start to seem alive. Like this big Muppety face that I mentioned. So this is the promise of the premise here. That we've got a larger-than-life maze, but it's made with these cost-effective production methods. Everything is arts and crafts. It's made of cardboard and paper and yarn and other recyclables.
Right. I know it's more expensive to make a movie than you ever think it's going to be. But I also wondered, like, the budget we know was less than $1 million because it was at Slam Dance. Did I see that it was $500,000? Did we already say that? I think I saw that in your notes.
Yeah, that's what Wikipedia said, $500,000. Against which it earned $30,000 at the box office.
Big oof.
Yeah. So something that they told us in film school was that just tell all your investors that there's no way they're going to get their money back. That you will not make money no matter what you make. Just, like, get people who believe in you and be upfront about that fact.
Yeah. It's hard to make it in the film business. So few films make money. That's why I just read this article. This guy, this movie last year called Barbarian. Did you watch that one, Brian?
I haven't seen it yet, but I listened to the Buzzed on Movies episode, so
okay,
I am familiar.
So he made that movie for $4 million, and it made like $45 or $50 million. And in fact, one week it actually topped the box office. And now all of a sudden it's like, as a guy who knows how to make money, like he came up from the indie scene and somehow managed to figure out how to get buzz in a movie that people were talking about and box office receipts. And he just got this ridiculous deal from one of the distributors where, all right, he's going to have final cut and they're going to guarantee that they'll do full wide release for his project and they'll fund it up to X million dollars. And it's like, I don't know. It seems risky to bet it on a guy who's made one movie, but
that's awesome. I mean, that's what they did with Orson Welles, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that ended up being kind of risky. It's like he knocked it out of the park the first time and then there were struggles afterwards.
That's true. But The point is, like, yeah, there's nothing in here that is like special effects to the point that I could see any of the effects being too expensive. Some of the stuff gets a little more elaborate, like room shaky things that must have been somewhat animatronic-y, but I would have, if you had me guess what the budget was, I probably would have gone less than $500,000, to be honest. But I don't know, because there is a lot to it. There's a quantity to it that kind of makes up for it. So what did you think?
Yes, I agree that I think you could still make this movie for less, but there's a lot of people in it. There's a lot of different rooms. That said, like, the stuff outside the maze looks very affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, but I was definitely thinking about how would I make this movie.
Okay.
And it seems like it would be fun to make this movie.
Yeah.
Like, you would probably have a good time doing it. The maze is full of, like, optical illusions, and we find out booby traps. I love a good booby trap movie.
What are the best booby trap movies, Brian?
You probably got to go with Raiders of the Lost Ark, but just the fact of having booby traps will elevate another movie for me. Like Goonies, some good booby traps. The DuckTales movie. There's a few. Maybe we do a booby trap month or something. Do you have any booby trap thoughts, Dan? Best booby trap?
I haven't put any thought into my all-time ranking for my booby trap movies, but I guess there are some booby traps in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that the opening in particular is what I'm thinking of.
Right. And then you gotta ask, like, is the whole Saw franchise, is that booby traps, or the whole Final Destination? That's like booby traps created by nature.
Oh, interesting. The God-given one.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? What about Home Alone? Does Home Alone count?
There you go. I actually have never seen Home Alone, but that is a perfect booby trap movie.
They should have put that as their subtitle, a perfect booby trap movie.
And soon people start falling victim to these booby traps. They brought in this passel of friends to bloat the body count, and people get sliced and diced suddenly by booby traps. Like a blade swings down like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and beheads a woman. Except instead of blood, red yarn and tissue paper comes spurting out. So in addition to killing you, the maze, like, makes you a craft project. I think Annie, the girlfriend, says, did she die or become a craft project? What did you think of this element of the world building, of the production design, Dan?
It was kind of interesting. I did like it when they died, and it was kind of ambiguous. I mean, we'll kind of talk, I think, a little bit about, like, what is the maze, like, symbolically, and how much of it is quote unquote real and how much of it is, like, representative of something going on in someone's head. The fact that they're all experiencing it suggests that it's not just going on in Dave's head, but there is an element of, like, kind of how Dave is seeing these people and, like, cutting them out as he goes deeper into his own quote unquote maze. But I always like the gimmick where you have, like, something bloody or viscera or something like that that's represented with cutesy craft stuff. I feel like I've seen that before. I'm trying to remember what the examples are. The blood is just, like, glitter and confetti or whatever it was, streamers.
Yeah, I feel like there's kind of a trend in maybe, like, the last 10 years of representing things kind of cheekily, cutesily with craft supplies.
Are there others you have in mind?
Well, the examples that come to mind for me are, maybe it's too narrow of a sample set, but I think of the Nintendo games Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Woolly World. Where it takes the way those games normally look, but suddenly everything, all the textures are, like, made out of yarn and paper bags and socks and things.
Yeah, I guess Trolls kind of does that too. If you've seen the animated Trolls movie, where it's like trying to represent the look of arts and crafts, and it has some like cheekiness about that every now and then. Like, oh, here they're farting out sparkles, or they're farting out glitter and stuff like that.
Yeah, or there was a Cartoon Network show called The World of Gumball, Amazing World of Gumball, where it's like very multimedia. And so there's stuff made of felt, and there's stuff made of construction paper and aluminum foil, but also some things are animated and some things are stop motion.
Is that the show that's like everybody who made animated shows worked on that? Or am I thinking of a different one?
You might be thinking of Flapjack.
Oh, okay.
Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. Although I'm sure there are people who, you know, it's a small pond when it comes to animators, so probably there are some big names and some up-and-comers who worked on Gumball. I actually have not watched that much of it, but it's like you look at a frame of it and you're struck by, there's like a lot of things going on here. A lot of different layers. Also, if you go a few more years back in time, the launch title game for PlayStation 3 called Little Big Planet, also kind of this vibe where you're like building out of different materials. As the friends are traveling through the maze, they're realizing, okay, well, it's killing people, things seem to be alive, this is more than it appears. They also discover that there is a minotaur rampaging around, because of course, if you got a labyrinth, you got to have a minotaur.
As soon as we started talking about it as a labyrinth, because there is some discussion about like, is it a labyrinth or is it a maze? But once it became clear that it was a labyrinth, it was like, okay, yeah, there's going to be a minotaur. And I kept wondering what the minotaur was going to be. My theory had been that the girlfriend would become the minotaur in some way, as sort of like especially if you start trying to read the maze metaphorically, that she becomes like an antagonistic force. But it didn't go that route.
That would be interesting. I feel like the metaphor doesn't quite solidify into what it wanted to be. I'm not sure, but we'll talk about it. The group does finally run into Dave wandering around. So now they're all lost together, except for that one friend who decided to come in after the fact. Dave's hand has become like cursed cardboard, like Dumbledore in, what was that, the 6th Harry Potter book?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of Luke Skywalker, too, with his chopped off hand in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, or one of the Studio Ghibli movies. Is it Princess Mononoke? Somebody's got like a parasite eating their arm.
Oh, if it is, I haven't seen that one in a while.
Okay. I think it's Princess Mononoke. The dude, there's like this wormy forest disease that starts eating his arm. And also the most recent Zelda game had that. Tears of the Kingdom. He's got like an arm curse. So there you go. Top 5 arm curse media.
Ready to drop it right there. There we go.
Cut out that 90 seconds as a standalone episode.
Our own top 5, yeah.
But the curse, we learned, like, happened because he touched a vagina portal. I didn't really understand that part.
Yeah. Neither did I. I feel like they were going for something, and whether that something was like, this dude needs feminine connection and he doesn't have it, so he represents this as like an alien force that destroys you, or if it was just intended to be shock humor, like, hey, here's the thing here that looks like a crystal vagina. Isn't that funny? Haha. I didn't know whether it was supposed to be resonant or goofy.
Right. Yeah. Same page. At first, I just thought it was a tunnel, and then they like linger on it, and then gradually I was like, oh, okay. But I still didn't know what it was supposed to mean.
Right.
They keep on through the maze, looking around. There's this one area. I kind of just want to talk about what are some of our favorite visuals, or just most memorable visuals. Because one room is a giant piano keyboard, and the black keys are holes. so you can like slide through into hidden corridors, which was like a hybrid for me of 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T with Labyrinth, where there's a couple times in Labyrinth where they do the thing where it looks like it's just a dark wall, and then you walk up to it and you realize it's actually recessed, and you can go back there and there's another hallway back there.
Yeah, I like this bit of production design. I thought that was cool. There was a couple of Alice in Wonderland type things too, like playing card references. Like dangling playing cards on the wall, or like you kind of walk through them or something. And I wondered if it was, I was thinking of the Jan Spankmeyer one that we watched, where some of the Alice in Wonderland stuff is all made by like this gnarly, crafty stuff.
That's right, all made out of different materials.
By far my favorite scene in the movie, though, is I didn't even quite understand what led up to it, but so Dave and his girlfriend are kind of walking around, and I think they're looking for the heart of the maze, of the labyrinth or something like that. But all of a sudden they're transported to like a sort of clone of their apartment. And it's kind of disorienting at first because you can't tell if it's a flashback or what's going on. And then they kind of keep reliving a couple of scenes, variations on the scenes, and they're in like different costumes. And it's kind of doing this clever editing where like their costume will flicker depending on like a role that they're playing in the conversation. Like she'll be dressed like a judge for a second when she's being judgmental of him. And just like all this little stuff in there that all of a sudden it felt like really idea dense. Like it was trying to parse out and find richness and in the relationship between them that a lot of the movie didn't have quite the same thing to it. And also this editing that it was doing was really cool. And I couldn't quite figure out how they were doing it because it seemed like a seamless edit where they would have all of a sudden, like in the midst of talking, a different costume on and stuff. And I thought the scene, it's towards the end of the movie, was really cool.
Yeah. So the decision that they reach, the friends, is they say, look, this whole maze is like a manifestation of Dave's inability to finish creative projects. So the way that we solve the maze is by allowing Dave to finish the maze, whatever that means, build the final touches and actually finish a project. And then Gordon, the best friend, says, well, the maze seems to be alive, so the way that we would finish it and then defeat it is to destroy the heart. And Dave says, well, I didn't make a heart. What would that even be? And so then Dave and Annie kind of journey off on one fork of a path to find / make the heart, as you said. And then the other friends kind of linger behind because there's this weird cardboard puppet that the maze has created as like a doppelganger for one of the people that it ate. And Harry, the documentarian, stays behind with his crew and is interviewing this puppet as kind of like an artificial device for getting the groups in a couple different subgroups. And yeah, Dave and Annie have this like vision quest where they're discussing what is the heart, how do we make the heart, how do we destroy the heart. Part of which is they have this own like little separate indie film where they're having this conversation that repeats. And each time they're in like slightly different roles. It's kind of Rashomon-y. It's like different ways of delivering the same lines. And yeah, they keep changing costumes. And all the different costumes are made out of this same craft stuff. And it's like they'll rip the costume away. And as they rip the clothes away, that's like a transition into the new, like, onion layer re-envisioning of this same exchange. And towards the end of this discussion, they start making the heart. But meanwhile, Harry is interviewing this creepy puppet. And my favorite part of this scene is that they expose that the puppet that looks like their friend is being manipulated by a giant monster hand. And the giant monster hand pulls the cameraman down into the abyss. But the cameraman is able to give his satchel of tapes to Harry so that the footage is not lost. I feel like there are stories where people go through these crazy events and they've got the film crew there to document it, but then something happens that the tapes are destroyed. Very rarely do both the tapes and the people get out.
So you appreciated that nod that he went for it?
I did. I appreciated that. Also that then when everybody reconvenes, Harry is taping on his iPhone because the cameraman got killed. Oh, and the camera went down in the pit too. So he's like, okay, everybody, stand so that I can see you. And he's got the phone camera. But the heart that Dave and Annie make at first is this paper flower thing, and then it unfolds into a zoetrope. So one of those old, proto-film devices where it's got different scenes laid out, and then you spin it, and it appears to animate. And I thought this was kind of a cool expression of the crafted nature of film. That it's, it's an illusion built up of individual images. And kind of like a microcosm of this whole idea that you make projects out of smaller pieces. Little distinct material components.
I'm glad you were able to get something out of that, because I had no idea what the significance was of this little spinny thing that is supposedly the heart of this entire project he's been working on.
And then he cuts it apart with a katana. And there was some exchange where they're like, why do you have a katana? And he says something like, it was at the checkout. Like a stick of gum or a candy bar. Oh yeah, they just had it and impulse buy. I related to that. I've bought katanas at Goodwill before. And now is when I want to say I saw a lot of similarities between this movie and Swiss Army Man. Did you see any of that?
Yeah, you had kind of mentioned that to me actually before I watched it, that I didn't know this was going to be so much like Swiss Army Man. And so I was kind of primed for it. And I definitely see where you're coming from on it, because the maze itself is kind of an extension of Dave in much the same way that Manny is an extension of, what's the name of Paul Dano's character?
I think he was called Hank.
And how he's kind of constructing this world almost as a way to cope with the failures of his own personal life and professional life, and how he's finding the easiest thing to do is to just kind of disconnect from it all, but also at the same time trying to find meaning in the work that he does and creating it, which isn't a one-to-one match for what we see in Swiss Army Man, but Swiss Army Man has a lot of that, where it's, we see obviously Paul Dano is projecting a lot of himself onto the Daniel Radcliffe corpse and discovering more about himself. And it ends up being much more about the main character making sense of the world around him and trying to process that and his failure to do so for this absurdist scenario.
Right. So both movies have this intentionally indie feel, but build these elaborate fantasy sets that are made out of trash. And it has this art project that's this mix of inspiring and pathetic simultaneously, that stands as a symbol for a struggling millennial artist dude. Because we find out that Dave, he starts griping that he's 30 and still living off his parents' money. He doesn't appear to have a job. He's an artist, so-called, but he rarely finishes any project that he starts. So that's what comes to light. He does seem to be doing a little better than Hank, though, but we also don't learn that much about what Hank's whole deal is. Like, more is left mysterious in Swiss Army Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Part of the intrigue of that is, like, trying to figure out what's Hank's deal in real life.
Right, and it's hard to say because there's so many layers of fantasy.
Right, and here we kind of lead with the fact that he's kind of a normal guy who has a girlfriend, you know?
Right, so score 1 point, 1 win for Dave the Maze Maker. No creeper shots on Dave's phone. And of course there's a big difference in budget. Dave Made a Maze was produced for $500,000, whereas Swiss Army Man had $3 million. So that's like, what, a factor of sixfold?
Mm-hmm.
And Swiss Army Man has higher profile actors, of course, who I'm sure got a lot of that money.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in budget, but I think part of the miracle of Swiss Army Man is how far they went with the budget. I mean, they're also like shooting on location there, which here, this is clearly all on sets, you know? And I just feel like there's cool stuff in Dave Made a Maze, but it never, for me, like had the sort of just awe-inspiring sense of what we were actually looking at that Swiss Army Man occasionally did.
Yeah, I feel that, and it's going to be reflected in my rating. This one did not blow me away as much as Swiss Army Man, and part of it may just be that I saw this one and it came after Swiss Army Man. It's like, this was 2017, that was 2016. And like, how many times do you tell the story of I'm weird and I'm sad, but I make art? Like, to an extent, did you see the movie, the Robert Zemeckis movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt where he's the tightrope walker?
I saw every Robert Zemeckis movie, so yes, I have seen that one. But yeah, The Walk, yeah.
Yeah. So the character that he plays in that movie, it's a true story. There was a documentary called Man on Wire about the same thing. It's the guy who walked the tightrope between the World Trade Center towers. But his character, his name is like Pierre somebody. He's a French street performer. And his job is that he stands in the street and like rides a unicycle and talks about the mystique of art. And like his dad gets fed up with him because why are you just doing pointless art? Why aren't you doing something with your life? And I feel like maybe there's something to that. And I speak from a glass house in this situation. It's like, I understand kind of why you would find yourself in that situation where you want to make art and are struggling and haven't amounted to much, but I also can understand people who would be frustrated with that kind of person.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about Dave Made a Maze is it has a little bit of that ambivalence on, like, is the maze good? Like, is the maze cool? Is the maze exciting and worthwhile? Because, I mean, first of all, it kills people, quote unquote. Second of all, it's just like this huge big old mess. And like, yeah, I was kind of with the girlfriend, particularly at the beginning. She gets home and is like, just, can you come out of the maze so I can talk to you like a person, like a human talks to a human? You're like, no, I'm in the maze. Hey, don't shake the box because I'm in the maze. I was like, who is this goober? But then you kind of see that there's more to it. But even still, it's kind of like, it is a little navel-gazy. I don't know. It's like digging in deeper and deeper into the sad, lonely, creative guy. Except he's not lonely because he's got a beautiful girlfriend. But yeah. So, I mean, the maze is cool and there's cool stuff in there. And I do get that the movie is kind of saying, hey, look at all this cool stuff, while also taking the time to see why it might be pathetic. Or maybe not pathetic, but like destructive.
Yeah, that's fair. Dave hacks the heart apart at the same time that Annie starts like slashing the cardboard boxes with a box cutter. And they all kind of make this mad dash towards the exit, pursued by the Minotaur. And they do manage to make it out of the maze. Anybody who hasn't been killed by a booby trap yet. And they all dash towards the exit. Although at one point they pass the Flemish tourists who are just having like a picnic in the maze. And I don't know what ultimately happens to them, because like then we smash cut to the back in the regular apartment. And the people who are still alive, it's like Dave and Annie and Gordon and Harry the documentarian and Harry's boom guy. They all kind of emerge, like climb out from under the boxes, and they start taking the maze apart, putting the boxes away, and all the people who died have just vanished. They're nowhere. They've been consumed. And there's, humor through the juxtaposition of that they're just like putting a bunch of boxes, breaking them down and putting them in the recycling bin. And then before Harry leaves, he tells Gordon, inform the next of kin.
I was thinking of a few things here. I was thinking of in Avatar, did Jet just die? Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of the great moments there. And then Anchorman, where Brick, played by Steve Carell, harpoons a guy. And they're like, you really probably should...
You should lie low a while. I killed a guy with a trident. And then the final beat is that, like, later that night, all this debris, all this recyclable junk is in a bin out in the alley, and the Minotaur crawls out of the pile and just walks off down the street. So I guess further blurring the line of what's real and what isn't. Of course, it's all a movie, so none of it is real, but kind of a funny end. And I wonder if at some point the tourists will crawl out of the heap because they didn't get killed. They were still alive in there.
You could still extract them from the materials, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe Dave will make a second maze.
Or maybe it'll be a Toy Story 3 situation where they're in the incinerator and finally they emerge. And it's oh God, now how do we escape the incinerator?
Man, Toy Story 3 is wild.
It is.
Just a really, like, monumental statement in filmmaking. And then they really didn't need Toy Story 4. And who knows what Toy Story 5 is even going to be. I'm holding out hope that we get Rise of the Planet of the Toys. By the way, that was another thing in the metagame. In the Outside the Pod, what I've been up to this past week is I watched all 9 of the Planet of the Apes movies so far.
What's the best one?
I would say the original, but I thought the second of the recent trilogy was really good. The Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
I haven't seen any of them. I really want to, especially with this new one coming out this year. I think it's already out as of the recording of this.
The original group of 5, all of them were pretty good. So I can see why they wanted to make more.
And is it that the new ones are like prequels to the 5?
Kind of, yes. But they did a good job of like borrowing and remixing elements of the 5 in the 3.
Okay.
And people also say that the fourth one, the one that Disney just made, is actually pretty good, so I'm curious.
Okay.
The Tim Burton one, I didn't hate. That has the lowest ratings on Letterboxd. That's the one that's a straight-up remake, but kind of. Like, it changed the twist ending, and the new twist that they came up with was kind of confusing.
I didn't know they changed the twist ending.
The costumes and the makeup were amazing. Like, it really looked like gorilla people. More on Planet of the Apes, perhaps, in the future.
I guess we'll see, yeah.
But, yeah, that's Dave Made a Maze. The indie film from 2017. Slam Dance winner. 2 other visuals I wanted to shout out because I thought they were cool. And you mentioned Alice in Wonderland. One of the rooms in the maze is like this forced perspective diorama of like a room with a table.
Mm-hmm.
And there's chairs around the table, and there's like a flower pot on the table. Except everything is different sizes and distances from the camera. So it's the same kind of forced perspective effects from Darby O'Gill. And the people walk into the room and they're like sticking their hands, they're like reaching out through the room and doing all these weird things showing that there's distance between and differences in size between items in the room.
That was a cool one.
Oh, and then in another room, there's a film being screened, like from a projector onto a wall, and they all walk in there, and Harry says, "Oh, this is that time we made a Victorian melodrama." And, you know, it shows the footage, and it's just like this awkward, stilted, and they're all in top hats and dresses. And he says, "I just couldn't crack it." So, again, just making me feel like the relatable experience of making zero budget films and roping your friends into them.
Have you made a Victorian melodrama or whatever it was, Brian?
Not exactly. I think the closest that I came was one of the 24-speed years we did an actuality, like a Lumiere's, click the camera on and the people in 1800s clothes are like eating food.
Mm-hmm.
You know, feeding a baby or watching a train or something.
Playing cards, yeah.
Right.
Here's my fun fact on actualities. The very first film that Méliès ever made was in fact a remake of an actuality made by the Lumieres. He wanted to try to replicate what the Lumieres were doing, so he did a remake of their playing cards actuality.
There you go. Oh, and that was one good thing in the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes was there was a scene where apes are playing cards and one of them is using all four of his ape hands. So he's got like leg sleeves and pulls a cheat card out of his leg sleeve. And like, that was great. That was genius.
Nice.
So then, Dan, are we ready to say whether Dave Made a Maze is a good movie?
Sure, let's do it. So Is It Good is our signature section where we each give the movie a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, which is an 8 out of 8. So I guess I will go first. Is Dave Made a Maze good? And I gotta say, I overall was not really vibing with this film. What I like about it, though, is that it's really creative, and it's made by this guy, this non-Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, where like a lot of the imagery is original and unique, and it's kind of invented whole cloth. I mean, I don't know if the stuff you're looking at itself is that original, but he had to make it all, and he had to envision it all, and he had to put it all together, and that's cool. And I just like it when on these small budgets, these people kind of make these ambitious things, but the humor wasn't really clicking for me, and I felt like the ideas were not all that formed. And quite honestly, some of the stuff looked good, and some of it didn't. Like, I really didn't like the puppet person who was like covered in cardboard paper or whatever. Although I did like the jump scare almost when the hand came out of it. I did really like the scene, like I mentioned, where they have the variations on the conversation. That was almost like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to me or something. Or like, I think Michel Gondry, who made Eternal Sunshine, has done some of this arts and crafts aesthetics in some of his later movies, although he didn't in Eternal Sunshine really. So kind of sloppy, not a bad sit. It's tries to be funny. None of the cast actually was really popping off for me. I know that you had attachment to the one guy, although I will say I found the documentary filmmakers to be really annoying. Maybe if I had like more connection to the comedy and the character itself, it would have done a little bit more for me, but it just felt like they kept inserting in this documentary crew, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand why they were there. It didn't really feel like it added much to me. I'm going to give this a lower end 4 out of 8, good-ish, because I do admire the creative chutzpah of going out there and doing something like this. And it does kind of end up feeling sort of like a statement, just not really a fully formed one. And like I said, it's not a bad hang. So maybe being just a little generous on that relative to how I was actually feeling about it, but it hangs in there. It's an interesting film. What about you, Brian?
Nice. I am going to rate it a little more highly, and it's 100% because this is a very Brian core movie. We talked when we covered the Taylor Swift music video, and of course, multiple times in the past about what is Dan core? What kind of things do we see and hear and experience in a Dan core film? And this one's really Brian core. So at the same time, I can't give it a super high rating because it doesn't trade in the Brian core tropes as effectively as something like Swiss Army Man. It just really pales in comparison to Swiss Army Man to me. But I did find it funny. I liked the filmmaker characters. They were kind of in the same vein of if you've watched Better Call Saul, there's these recurring film student characters who come and help Saul make his low-budget local commercials. And yeah, it's navel-gazy. It's like these are the kind of jokes that you get if you are a zero-budget filmmaker. And of course, that character was played by an actor that I recognized, the only actor that I recognized. Venture Brothers is another thing that is better than this movie. But still, just edges into 6 out of 8 for me. Very good. I recommend it. I have a respect for it that they could take the limited resources and create a full fantasy feature and kind of play on the ideas of, like, it kind of at the same time is showing you that there's only so much that you can do with $500,000, which is like an amount of money that's out of reach for a lot of indie filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So it really kind of shines both a light on the possibilities and the limitations of what they're working with. So I vibed with it. Definitely, though, not to the same extent as Swiss Army Man.
Okay.
But I'm glad we watched it.
Yeah.
Occasionally I like to put on a movie that I have not seen before, which is very rare in terms of my episode selections. I mean, there's plenty of movies that I haven't seen, obviously, but I tend not to pick those as the ones that we talk about on my episodes.
Yeah, it's fun to go in as a blind pick every now and again and see how you feel about something. I'm glad it worked for you.
And I'm glad that you finished it.
Well, it's only 80 minutes, Brian, so.
Yeah. A little more merciful than a 6-hour YouTube video or something. But Dan, what will we be watching next?
I've been cooking something for a little bit, Brian, and we're going to do it next week. So we're going to watch a movie, but then there's going to be a supplemental activity. So I'm going to pick a Walt Disney Animation Studio movie, and then we're going to do a draft, a fantasy draft of songs from Walt Disney Animation Studios. And I think it's going to be fun. We're going to have on, if I can get the logistics right, a couple of people who haven't been on the pod before. And we'll talk about exactly what this exercise is, but I'm pretty excited about it. And as an accompaniment, of course, I always like us to have a film that we talk about as associated with whatever exercise we're doing. And I wanted something I hadn't seen in a while, and preferably something with music so we could talk about it. Most of them have music, so that works. I'm going to pick the 1953 Peter Pan film because I haven't seen it in a long time, and I've just heard mixed things about it recently. So I'm going to be interested to see how I feel about it because some people I know like it, some people I know don't like it. I can't remember whether or not you like it, Brian.
So, listeners, we'll talk about this again when we get to the episode, but I actually had Peter Pan like in the top 6, like just outside my top 5. It was up there. It might have been 7 behind Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, wow.
But I think it's one that is like very iconic, and a lot of it endures in the Disney image. Obviously, lots of use of Tinkerbell, lots of use of the idea of flying to Neverland and like staying a kid. Less use to this day of things like what makes the red man red.
I guess we'll see all that, but I'm looking forward to this, Brian. And I know it's another Disney movie. We just did one like 5 episodes ago or something, but it's a rich vein, I think, for us. So I'll talk to you next week about Peter Pan.
Looking forward to it. Some good Hans Conried coverage.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you join us again.
Talk to you later, Brian.